Bullies mocked the quiet girl until she revealed her secret. Now they regret everything. 17-year-old Maya Valdez had always been the type of person who preferred shadows to spotlights. With her slight frame, oversized hoodies, and habit of keeping her dark eyes fixed on the ground, she moved through the hallways of Riverside High like a ghost. Her family had moved to this suburban town just 3 months ago when her father got transferred, and Maya still felt like an outsider trying to navigate an already established social ecosystem. The chemistry lab on the 3rd floor had become her sanctuary during lunch breaks. While other students gathered in the cafeteria or courtyard, Maya would slip into the empty classroom to eat her sandwich in peace, surrounded by the familiar smell of sulfur and the quiet hum of ventilation fans. She'd pull out her worn paperback novels and lose herself in worlds where shy protagonists eventually found their voice. What none of her classmates knew was that Maya had spent the last 8 years training in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts at her uncle's gym back in Phoenix. Her compact frame housed muscles that had been honed through countless hours of grappling, striking, and conditioning. She could execute a perfect armbar, knew 17 different ways to escape a chokehold, and had won 3 regional championships in her weight class. But Maya's father, a gentleman who worked in accounting, had always taught her that violence should be the absolute last resort. "Your skills are for protection, Mija," he'd say, "not for proving points." The trouble started during her 2nd week at Riverside High. Jessica Hartwell, a statuesque blonde who seemed to command attention wherever she went, first noticed Maya in the hallway near the lockers. Jessica had been the undisputed queen of the junior class since freshman year, with her perfect makeup, designer clothes, and entourage of followers who hung on her every word. She had pale blue eyes that could cut through glass, and a smile that never quite reached them when she looked at people she deemed beneath her notice. "Look at this little mouse," Jessica had whispered to her best friend Brittany Chen, loud enough for Maya to hear. "Does she ever take that hood off? Maybe she's hiding something gross underneath." Maya had simply adjusted her backpack straps and continued to her locker, pretending she hadn't heard. But Jessica's words planted a seed that would grow into something much more toxic. The bullying escalated gradually. At first, it was just snide comments passed in the hallway. Jessica would make remarks about Maya's clothes, her accent, or the way she always seemed to be alone. Brittany would giggle on cue, and soon other students began to take notice. Maya noticed how conversations would stop when she walked by, how groups would part and reform after she passed, leaving her feeling like she was walking through a minefield of whispered judgments. The cafeteria became a particular battleground. Maya had tried eating there during her 1st week, but Jessica's table commanded a clear view of the entire room. Every time Maya would sit down, she'd hear Jessica's voice carrying across the space. "Oh my God, look at her eating. Does she even know how to use a fork properly?" Or, "I bet she doesn't even shower. That's probably why she always wears that same hoodie." Maya's cheeks would burn with embarrassment, but she forced herself to finish her lunch slowly, methodically. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her run. But eventually, she stopped coming to the cafeteria altogether, choosing instead to eat in the chemistry lab where she could find some peace. The harassment extended beyond meal times. In the hallways, Jessica would deliberately shoulder-check Maya when passing, then act like it was an accident. "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there," she'd say with mock concern. "You're so small, it's like you're invisible." During group projects in English class, Maya would find herself excluded from teams, forced to work alone, while Jessica made sure everyone knew it was because nobody really knows her, and she's probably not even that smart anyway. The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, seemed oblivious to the social dynamics playing out in her classroom, focused instead on lesson plans and curriculum requirements. Maya's internal monologue during these moments was a constant battle. "I could end this right now," she'd think as Jessica's laughter echoed through the hallway. "One perfectly executed takedown and she'd never bother me again." But then she'd hear her father's voice, reminding her about using her skills responsibly. She'd remember her uncle's teachings about honor and discipline, about how true strength came from restraint, not aggression. The worst part was the bystanders. Maya watched as students who had no particular allegiance to Jessica would still laugh at her jokes, still participate in the collective shunning. She saw the way teachers would look right through incidents that happened in plain sight, too busy or too uncomfortable to intervene. The isolation was almost worse than the actual bullying. At home, Maya's parents noticed her growing withdrawal. Her mother, Elena, would find her daughter staring out her bedroom window for hours, lost in thought. "How was school today, Mija?" she'd ask, but Maya would just shrug and mumble something about it being fine. She couldn't bear to tell them what was happening, couldn't stand the thought of her father's disappointed face or her mother's worry. They had enough stress with the new job, the new mortgage, the general upheaval of starting over in a new place. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late October. Maya was at her locker, switching out her textbooks for first period, when she felt someone grab her hood and yank it back hard. Her long black hair spilled out, and she turned to see Jessica standing there with a satisfied smirk on her face. "Well, well," Jessica announced loudly enough for the entire hallway to hear. "Look what was hiding under there. I was starting to think you might be bald or something." Maya's face flushed red as she quickly pulled her hood back up, but Jessica wasn't done. She reached out and tugged it off again, this time even more roughly. "Don't hide from us, little mouse. We just want to see what you really look like." A crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, could hear the whispers and giggles starting to build. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear, from the effort of holding herself back. "Stop," Maya said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What was that?" Jessica cupped her ear dramatically. "Did the little mouse say something? Speak up, we can't hear you." Brittany giggled from beside her. "Maybe she doesn't actually speak English. Maybe that's why she's so quiet all the time." The crowd laughed, and Maya felt something snap inside her chest. Every lesson her uncle had taught her about discipline and control suddenly felt very far away, but she managed to take a deep breath, pull her hood back up, and turn toward her first class. Jessica wasn't about to let her retreat so easily. She grabbed Maya's backpack and yanked it off her shoulders, sending her books and papers scattering across the hallway floor. "Oops," Jessica said with fake concern. "How clumsy of me." Maya knelt down to gather her scattered belongings, her hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of restraint. She could feel Jessica standing over her, could sense the crowd pressing closer. Someone stepped on one of her notebooks, leaving a dirty footprint on the cover. "You know what?" Jessica said, crouching down next to Maya. "I'm actually trying to help you here. You're never going to make friends if you keep hiding from everyone. Maybe if you actually talk to people instead of skulking around like some kind of weirdo, you wouldn't be so pathetic." Maya's jaw clenched. She gathered the last of her papers and stood up slowly, deliberately. When she looked at Jessica, there was something different in her eyes, a flicker of something that made Jessica take an involuntary step backward. "I said stop," Maya repeated, but this time her voice carried more weight. It was quiet, but it cut through the hallway noise like a blade. For just a moment, Jessica looked uncertain, but then she glanced around at her audience and puffed herself up again. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, little mouse?" Maya looked at her for a long moment, and Jessica could swear she saw something dangerous flash across the quiet girl's face. But then Maya simply adjusted her backpack straps and walked away, leaving Jessica standing in the hallway feeling strangely unsettled. That incident marked a turning point. Over the next few weeks, Maya found herself changing in subtle ways. She started arriving at school earlier, spending time in the gym before classes began. She'd shoot baskets alone, do pull-ups on the equipment, stretch in ways that reminded her body of its capabilities. The physical activity helped her manage the stress, but it also served as a reminder of who she really was beneath the timid exterior. Other students began to notice small changes. Maya walked differently now, with her shoulders back and her head up. She still wore her hood, but she didn't hunch inside it anymore. In classes, she started participating more, her voice growing stronger when she answered questions. Her grades, already good, began to improve even further. Mrs. Rodriguez, the English teacher, was the first adult to really notice the transformation. During a discussion about character development in literature, Maya offered an insight about how adversity could reveal hidden strengths that impressed the entire class. After the bell rang, Mrs. Rodriguez asked Maya to stay behind. "I've noticed you're coming out of your shell more," the teacher said kindly. "I'm glad to see you finding your voice." Maya nodded, but didn't elaborate. She was still processing her own changes, still trying to understand what was happening inside her. The daily humiliations had become fuel for something she didn't quite recognize yet. Jessica, meanwhile, seemed to sense that something was shifting. The easy target she'd been tormenting for months was showing signs of resistance, and it frustrated her. She increased her efforts, bringing more friends into her campaign of harassment. They started following Maya to the chemistry lab, peeking through the windows and making faces at her while she ate lunch. They'd whisper and point when she walked by, making sure she knew she was being discussed. But Maya was changing in ways that went beyond confidence. She was remembering who she used to be, the girl who had won tournaments, who had trained with grown men twice her size and held her own. She was remembering the feeling of being strong, of being capable, of being respected for her skills rather than dismissed for her appearance. The memory of her last competition in Phoenix came back to her with startling clarity. She'd been facing a girl who had defeated her twice before, someone everyone expected to win. But Maya had been patient, had waited for the right moment, and when her opponent made a mistake, Maya had executed a perfect counter that left the crowd gasping. The respect in her opponent's eyes afterward had meant more than the gold medal. One evening, while her parents were watching television, Maya went to her room and pulled out her old training clothes. The familiar weight of the GI in her hands brought back a flood of memories. She looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, and saw not the timid girl who had been walking the halls of Riverside High, but the fighter who had spent years honing her craft. The next morning, Maya left her house 30 minutes earlier than usual. Instead of going straight to school, she made a detour to the park 3 blocks away. In the quiet of the early morning, with dew still on the grass and the sun just beginning to rise, she began to move through the forms she'd practiced thousands of times. Her body remembered every movement, every transition, every breath. The kata flowed like water, each technique precise and controlled. Maya felt the familiar burn in her muscles, the satisfying stretch of tendons and ligaments that had been neglected for too long. When she finished, she was breathing hard, but felt more centered than she had in months. She made this early morning training a daily routine. Push-ups, sit-ups, shadow boxing, forms, all performed in the privacy of the park before school. Her body began to respond, muscles firming, reflexes sharpening. More importantly, her mind began to clear. The fog of victimhood that had been clouding her judgment started to lift. Students at school began to notice the change more obviously. Maya moved with a different energy now, a quiet confidence that was hard to define, but impossible to ignore. She still wore her hood, still kept to herself, but there was something in her posture that suggested she was no longer hiding. During lunch in the chemistry lab, Maya found herself thinking less about Jessica's cruelty and more about her own response to it. She realized that her restraint hadn't been noble. It had been fear. Fear of consequences, fear of judgment, fear of becoming something she didn't want to be. But now she was beginning to understand that there was a difference between aggressive violence and defensive strength. The climax came on a Friday afternoon in November. Maya was leaving through the back exit of the school, hoping to avoid the usual crowd, when she found Jessica, Brittany, and 3 other girls waiting for her. They'd clearly planned this confrontation, positioning themselves between Maya and the gate that led to the street. "Going somewhere, little mouse." Jessica's voice was different now, harder. Maya could sense that her growing confidence had been noticed and was being perceived as a threat. "I'm going home," Maya said simply, adjusting her backpack straps. "Not so fast," Brittany stepped forward. "We want to talk to you." Maya looked around and realized they were relatively alone. The back area of the school was deserted except for them, and the building blocked them from view of the street. Her heart rate increased, but not from fear, from anticipation. "We've been watching you," Jessica continued, moving closer. "Acting all confident lately, like you're somebody special, but we know what you really are." Maya said nothing, just watched them carefully. She could read their body language, could see the aggression building in their postures. These weren't just mean girls anymore. They were predators who had cornered what they thought was prey. "You know what I think?" Jessica's voice took on a cruel edge. "I think you need to be reminded of your place here." Without warning, Jessica shoved Maya hard in the chest. Maya staggered backward, but didn't fall. The push was hard enough to be assault, aggressive enough to cross the line from verbal harassment to physical attack. "There's the little mouse we know," Jessica laughed. "All that fake confidence disappears pretty quick, doesn't it?" Maya straightened up slowly, her eyes never leaving Jessica's face. "Don't touch me again." "Or what?" Jessica pushed her again, this time even harder. "What are you going to do about it?" Maya's training kicked in automatically. She absorbed the push, using Jessica's momentum against her to maintain her balance. When Jessica reached out to push her a 3rd time, Maya was ready. She caught Jessica's wrist mid-push, twisted it smoothly, and in one fluid motion, executed a perfect hip throw that sent Jessica flying through the air. Jessica landed hard on her back, the wind knocked out of her, staring up at the sky in complete shock. The other girls froze, their mouths hanging open. Nobody moved for several seconds. Maya stood over Jessica, perfectly balanced, breathing calmly. "I told you not to touch me." Jessica struggled to sit up, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "You crazy bitch! What the hell was that?" "That was me defending myself," Maya said quietly, "which I have every right to do." Brittany found her voice. "You can't just attack people. We'll report you." Maya looked at her with calm eyes. "For what? Defending myself against assault? There are security cameras on this building. They'll show exactly who started this." Jessica finally managed to get to her feet, rage burning in her eyes. "You think you're so tough now? That was just a lucky move." "It wasn't luck," Maya said simply. Something in her tone made Jessica pause. There was no boasting, no anger, just quiet certainty. Maya stood completely relaxed, but Jessica could sense the coiled strength beneath the surface. "Who are you?" Jessica asked, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in her voice. Maya pulled back her hood, letting her long black hair fall free. "I'm someone who's been trying very hard to avoid this conversation. But since you insisted on having it, let me be clear. I've spent 8 years training in martial arts. I've won regional championships. I can break boards with my bare hands, and I know exactly how much pressure it takes to dislocate a shoulder." The girls took an involuntary step backward. "But more importantly," Maya continued, "I know the difference between using my skills to hurt people and using them to protect myself. What just happened was protection. If you come at me again, it will still be protection, but it might be a lot more comprehensive." Jessica's face was white now. "You're threatening us." "I'm informing you," Maya corrected. "I've tried to handle this situation without conflict. I've walked away, I've ignored you, I've done everything I could to avoid exactly this moment, but you wouldn't let it go. You kept pushing and pushing until you finally pushed too far. She looked at each of the girls in turn. I don't want to hurt any of you. I don't want to be known as the girl who beats people up, but I also won't be anyone's victim, not anymore. Brittany tugged on Jessica's sleeve. Come on, let's just go. But Jessica's pride was wounded, and wounded pride makes people do stupid things. You got lucky once, she snarled. Let's see how tough you really are. She rushed at Maya, arms outstretched, clearly intending to tackle her to the ground. Maya sidestepped smoothly, caught Jessica's arm, and used her own momentum to send her tumbling into the fence behind them. Jessica hit the chain link hard and slumped to the ground, dazed. Stay down, Maya advised calmly. Please. Jessica looked up at her with a mixture of pain and disbelief. The other girls were backing away now, clearly unwilling to test Maya's capabilities themselves. This is over, Maya said firmly. All of it. The comments, the harassment, the deliberate bumping in the hallways. It stops now. You can't make us do anything, Brittany said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maya looked at her with patience. I'm not making you do anything. I'm just explaining what will happen if you don't. I've been training since I was 9 years old. I know how to defend myself, and I will every time. She helped Jessica to her feet, noting with satisfaction that her former tormentor didn't try to pull away. I don't want to fight you. I never wanted to fight any of you. But I also won't let you treat me like garbage just because you can get away with it. Jessica dusted herself off, her face burning with humiliation. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Maya said quietly, because now you know who you're dealing with, and you know that I won't just take it anymore. She picked up her backpack and walked toward the gate, leaving the group of girls standing there in stunned silence. As she reached the street, she could hear them arguing among themselves, their voices high with shock and confusion. Maya walked home in a daze, her mind replaying the confrontation over and over. She felt strange, not triumphant exactly, but relieved. Like a weight she'd been carrying for months had finally been lifted from her shoulders. At dinner that night, her parents noticed the change immediately. Maya sat up straighter, made eye contact when she spoke, and actually smiled during the conversation. When her mother asked about school, Maya said, "It was better today. I think things are going to be different now." Her father looked at her carefully. Different how? Maya considered the question. I remembered who I am. The following Monday, Maya walked into school with her hood down. Her long hair fell freely around her shoulders, and she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced her fears and emerged victorious. Students noticed the change immediately. Conversation stopped as she passed, but the whispers now carried a note of respect rather than mockery. In the hallway by the lockers, Maya encountered Jessica and her group. For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then Jessica looked away first, suddenly finding something fascinating in her locker. The others followed suit, and Maya walked past without incident. Mrs. Rodriguez approached her after English class. You seem different lately, Maya. More confident. It's nice to see, Maya smiled. I've been working on standing up for myself. That's wonderful, the teacher said warmly. Though I hope you know that if you ever need support, there are adults here who can help. I know, Maya nodded, but sometimes you have to help yourself first. The transformation in the school's social dynamics was gradual but noticeable. Students who had previously ignored Maya or participated in her exclusion began to nod in acknowledgement when they passed her. A few even attempted conversations, curious about the quiet girl who had somehow earned Jessica Hartwell's very visible respect. During lunch, Maya still preferred the chemistry lab, but now it was by choice rather than necessity. She could have eaten in the cafeteria if she wanted to, but she genuinely enjoyed the quiet sanctuary where she could read and think without interruption. One afternoon, as she was leaving the lab, she found a younger student being cornered by two older boys. The freshman looked terrified, clutching his textbooks to his chest, while the bigger students demanded his lunch money. Maya paused, remembering her own months of torment. Then she walked over calmly. "Is there a problem here?" she asked quietly. The two bullies looked at her dismissively. "Mind your own business, girl." "Actually," Maya said, stepping closer, "I think this is everyone's business. You're on school property, threatening a student. That makes it my business." Something in her tone made them take a second look. They'd heard the rumors about Jessica Hartwell's group suddenly leaving Maya alone, but they'd assumed it was just teenage drama. "Look, we're just talking to our friend here," one of them said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya looked at the freshman. "Are they your friends?" The boy shook his head frantically. "Then I suggest you move along," Maya said to the bullies, "before this becomes a bigger problem than you want to deal with." The boys looked at each other uncertainly. Maya was smaller than both of them, but there was something in her stance, in the way she held herself, that suggested violence would be a very poor choice. "Whatever," one of them muttered, and they walked away. The freshman looked at Maya with awe. "Thank you," he breathed. "They've been doing that to me for weeks." Maya felt a familiar surge of anger at the injustice, but also something else, a sense of purpose. "What's your name?" "Danny," the boy said shyly. "Listen, Danny," Maya said gently. "Bullies are cowards. They pick on people they think won't fight back. But once you show them you won't be an easy target, they usually move on to someone else." She paused, thinking about her own journey. "That doesn't mean you have to fight, but you do have to stand up for yourself. And if you ever need help doing that, find me." Danny nodded eagerly, and Maya watched him walk away with a little more confidence in his step. She realized that her own transformation had given her something valuable, the ability to help others find their strength. 2 weeks later, Maya was surprised to find Jessica approaching her locker. The former Queen Bee looked nervous, which was a stark contrast to her usual imperious confidence. "Can I talk to you?" Jessica asked quietly. Maya nodded, curious despite herself. "I wanted to apologize," Jessica said, the words coming out in a rush, "for everything. The comments, the harassment, all of it. I was being a complete bitch to you for no reason." Maya studied her former tormentor's face. "Why?" Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Honestly, I was threatened by you. You were smart. You minded your own business. You didn't need anyone's approval. I guess I thought if I could make you feel small, it would make me feel bigger." Maya nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "I've been thinking about what you said," Jessica continued, "about how you didn't want to hurt anyone. Even after everything I did to you, you only used enough force to stop me, not to really hurt me. That's not how most people would have handled it." "Violence should be the last resort," Maya said quietly. "And even then, you should only use as much as necessary." Jessica looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "My uncle's gym back in Phoenix, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts." "Why didn't you ever say anything? I mean, if people knew you could fight, they would have left you alone." Maya considered the question. "Because I didn't want to be known as the girl who fights. I wanted to be known for other things, but I also wasn't going to let myself be anyone's victim." Jessica nodded slowly. "I respect that. And I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out what kind of person you really are." Maya extended her hand. "Fresh start?" Jessica shook it gratefully. "Fresh start." Over the following weeks, Maya watched as Jessica made efforts to change her behavior with other students as well. She wasn't perfect. Habits formed over years don't disappear overnight, but she was clearly trying to use her social influence more positively. Maya continued her morning training sessions at the park, but now they felt different. Instead of preparing for a battle, she was maintaining a discipline that had become central to her identity. She was no longer the scared girl hiding in oversized hoodies, but she also wasn't the bitter victim fantasizing about revenge. She was simply Maya, confident, capable and comfortable in her own skin. The incident with Jessica became something of a legend at Riverside High, though the details grew more elaborate with each telling. Maya didn't correct the exaggerations or seek to minimize them. She let the story exist as it was, understanding that sometimes a reputation for strength was its own form of protection. On a warm afternoon in late spring, Maya was walking home from school when she encountered a group of middle schoolers surrounding a smaller child. The scene was heartbreakingly familiar. The circle of spectators, the cruel laughter, the victim's attempts to become invisible. Maya approached the group calmly. "That's enough," she said quietly. The middle schoolers looked at her with adolescent bravado. "Who are you, our mom?" Maya smiled slightly. "No, I'm someone who knows exactly what you're doing and why you need to stop." Something in her tone made them pause. Maya had learned that true authority came not from shouting or threatening, but from quiet certainty. "He's weird," one of the bullies protested. "He doesn't talk to anyone." "Maybe he's shy," Maya suggested. "Maybe he's new. Maybe he's just different. None of those things make him fair game for this kind of treatment." She looked at each of the bullies in turn. "You all know this is wrong. You know it, and you're doing it anyway because you think there won't be consequences." The surrounded child looked up at Maya with desperate hope. She could see herself in his eyes, the fear, the humiliation, the desperate wish for someone to intervene. "There are always consequences," Maya continued. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. The question is whether you want to find out what those consequences are." The bullies looked at each other uncertainly. Maya wasn't threatening them exactly, but there was something in her presence that suggested testing her patience would be unwise. "Whatever," the ringleader muttered, and the group dispersed. Maya helped the younger boy gather his scattered belongings. "You okay?" He nodded, still too shaken to speak. "It gets better," Maya told him gently. "I promise it gets better. But you have to believe you deserve better first." As she walked away, Maya reflected on how far she'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been the victim in that circle. Now she was the one stopping it. The transformation hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been quick, but it had been complete. She understood now that her uncle's lessons about discipline and restraint hadn't been about avoiding conflict. They'd been about choosing the right battles and fighting them with honor. She'd learned that strength wasn't about intimidating others, but about refusing to be intimidated. Most importantly, she'd discovered that standing up for yourself didn't mean becoming everything you hated about your oppressors. Maya pulled out her phone and texted her parents. "Had a good day at school. See you at dinner." For the first time in months, that message was completely true.